I'm Charlotte Reynolds, 34, and I still feel the sting of my sister's palm across my face whenever I close my eyes. What should have been a joyful wedding dress appointment turned into the moment I discovered my family wasn't what I thought. One slap revealed years of hidden resentment, and by the end of that day, I'd made a decision that would alter our family forever. The expensive dress hung abandoned on its hanger as I walked away from more than just a bridal boutique. Hey everyone! Before I dive deeper into this family drama that completely upended my life, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you've ever had to deal with entitled family members, you'll definitely want to stick around for what happens next. Hit that subscribe button and like this video if you've ever had to teach someone a hard lesson about appreciation. Now, let's get back to the moment everything changed. Growing up in suburban Chicago, I was always the responsible one. While my younger sister Victoria basked in the spotlight as the family's golden child, I worked diligently behind the scenes. Our parents, my father, a successful attorney, and my mother, a former beauty queen turned socialite, doted on Victoria from the day she was born. With her striking blue eyes, naturally blonde hair, and effortless charm, she became the center of our family's universe. I, on the other hand, inherited my grandmother's practical nature and work ethic, traits that earned respect but rarely adoration. By the time I reached my 30s, I had built a thriving financial consulting business, while Victoria, now 29, floated between passion projects and relationships. Despite the disparities in our paths, I remained her steadfast supporter. When Victoria announced her engagement to Ethan, a plastic surgeon from a prominent family, our parents were ecstatic. Finally, my mother whispered to me after the announcement dinner, "She's found someone to take care of her properly." The comment stung, but I smiled anyway. What no one knew was that Victoria's lavish lifestyle had been partially subsidized by me for years. It started with temporary loans during her college years, textbooks, rent when she spent her allowance on weekend getaways, emergency car repairs after fender benders. The pattern continued into adulthood. I covered the down payment on her condo when she couldn't qualify for a mortgage, paid off credit card debt when she maxed out shopping, and quietly handled insurance premiums when she forgot to pay them. Our parents believed Victoria was finding her way, unaware that I was the safety net preventing her falls. When Victoria called me, breathless with excitement about her engagement, I was genuinely happy for her. "Ethan's family expects a certain kind of wedding," she explained. "Something befitting their status." I heard the familiar undercurrent in her voice, the prelude to a request. His mother mentioned they'd contribute, but not until we have a solid budget and venues secured. Before she could ask directly, I offered to help. "I could cover the initial deposits," I said. "Consider it my engagement gift." What I didn't say was that I'd been saving for years, anticipating this very moment. I'd set aside nearly $75,000, knowing someday Victoria would need it for her dream wedding. What Victoria didn't know was that my business, while successful, had recently weathered a difficult year. I'd lost 2 major clients to overseas competitors and invested heavily in new software systems. The wedding fund represented a significant portion of my financial cushion, but family came first, it always had. I consoled myself with the thought that Victoria would finally see my sacrifices, that this grand gesture would bridge the emotional gap between us. Perhaps, just once, she would look at me with the same admiration she reserved for our parents' approval. The wedding planning began immediately. Victoria created elaborate Pinterest boards and joined exclusive bridal groups. She scheduled consultations with the city's most sought-after planners and booked appointments at boutiques that required deposits just to try on dresses. I wrote checks without comment, watching my savings dwindle while Victoria's excitement grew. "This will be the wedding of the season," she declared during one of our planning lunches. "Ethan's family knows everyone who matters in Chicago." I nodded and smiled, ignoring the dull ache that had become my constant companion. Victoria had never asked about my relationships or why, at 34, I remained single. She didn't know about Michael, the environmental lawyer I'd dated for 3 years, who left when I couldn't commit to starting a family while supporting my own. She never questioned why I worked 60-hour weeks or declined vacations. In Victoria's world, I was simply Charlotte, reliable, practical, and always there when needed. I told myself this role was my choice, my gift to the sister I loved despite everything. But deep down, a small voice wondered if I was enabling a pattern that would never change. Little did I know, Victoria's wedding preparations would soon force me to confront the uncomfortable truth about our relationship and finally decide what I was truly willing to sacrifice for family loyalty. The official wedding planning kickoff dinner happened at Aurelio's, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. Victoria had invited her future in-laws, our parents, me, and her 3 bridesmaids. I arrived early, having left the office in the middle of an important client meeting to make it on time. The maitre d' led me to our private dining room, where I found Victoria adjusting flower arrangements that had clearly just been delivered. "These roses are the wrong shade," she snapped without looking up. "I specifically requested blush, not pink. It completely throws off the aesthetic." I set down my purse and coat. "They look beautiful to me. No one will notice the difference." Victoria finally glanced at me, her expression shifting from irritation to assessment. "Is that what you're wearing?" I mentioned this was a formal dinner. I looked down at my charcoal gray business suit, the same one I'd worn to my meeting. "This is formal." "It's Armani." "It's boring," Victoria sighed. "And corporate." "This is a wedding planning dinner, not a tax audit." Before I could respond, our parents arrived, followed quickly by Ethan and his family. The Caldwells were Chicago aristocracy, old money with the confident ease that comes from generations of privilege. Ethan's mother, Diane, embraced Victoria warmly before offering me a polite nod. Throughout dinner, Victoria charmed everyone with her vision for the wedding, a ceremony at Holy Name Cathedral, followed by a reception at the Peninsula Hotel. 300 guests, a 10-piece orchestra, custom monogrammed everything. "And Charlotte has been absolutely incredible," Victoria announced as dessert arrived. "She's handling all the initial deposits until everything's finalized." All eyes turned to me. Ethan's father, Richard, raised an eyebrow. "That's quite generous of you." "Family supports family," I said simply, uncomfortable with the attention. "Charlotte's always been our practical one," my mother added with a proud smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So good with money and planning." "Someone has to be," I said, attempting humor but hearing the edge in my voice. Later that evening, as the dinner wound down, Victoria pulled me aside. "I've scheduled appointments at 3 bridal salons next week. The first one's at Magnolia Bridal. They have those exclusive European designers I love." "I can't take 3 full days off work, Vic," I said. "I have client commitments." Victoria's face fell into a familiar pout. "But I need you there. Mom will just push her outdated tastes, and Ethan's mother is intimidating. You're the only one who really gets my vision." The compliment, rare as it was, worked its magic. I found myself nodding. "I'll see what I can move around." The following week, I rescheduled client meetings and delegated projects to my assistant. The first bridal appointment started badly and deteriorated from there. Victoria rejected dress after dress, criticizing everything from fabric to silhouette. The bridal consultant, initially enthusiastic, grew increasingly strained. "Perhaps something from the new Marchesa collection," she suggested after 2 hours of failed attempts. Victoria brightened. "Yes, I saw their runway show online." The consultant returned with a gown that silenced the room. Hand-embroidered lace cascaded over champagne silk, with a cathedral train adorned with crystals and pearls. Even I, with my limited fashion knowledge, recognized its beauty. "This is the one," Victoria breathed as she stood before the mirrors. "It's perfect." My mother dabbed at her eyes. "You look like a princess." The consultant smiled triumphantly. "This is one of our premier gowns. It's $27,500. I felt the blood drain from my face, but kept my expression neutral. Victoria spun before the mirror, enchanted with her reflection. "We'll need to place a 50% deposit today to order it," the consultant continued. "These gowns are created individually in their Paris atelier." Victoria turned to me, eyes shining. "It's the one, Charlie." I've never been more sure of anything. In that moment, looking at my sister's genuine happiness, I pushed aside my financial concerns. I wrote the check for $13,750, telling myself this was why I'd saved all those years. Victoria hugged me briefly before returning to admire her reflection, already discussing veil options with the consultant. The next 2 days followed a similar pattern. Victoria selected bridesmaid dresses that cost more than most people's entire wedding attire. She chose invitations from a calligrapher who'd worked with European royalty. Each decision came with another check from my account, another dent in my carefully constructed financial security. By Friday afternoon, I'd committed nearly $42,000 in deposits and payments. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, spreadsheets open on my laptop, calculating how much more I could manage before reaching my absolute limit. What I didn't know was that the true test of my generosity and the breaking point of our relationship would come the very next day at the final bridal appointment, when Victoria would reveal exactly how she viewed my role in her life. Saturday morning arrived with a text from Victoria, "Need you at Elysium Bridal by 11. Found perfect accessories online, but need to see in person." I glanced at the clock, 8:17 a.m. I had planned to catch up on work before meeting her, but those plans would now have to wait. I quickly showered, dressed in a casual but elegant outfit that I hoped would meet Victoria's approval, and headed downtown. Elysium Bridal was located in Chicago's Gold Coast, a boutique so exclusive it didn't display merchandise in its windows, just artful arrangements of silk flowers and crystal sculptures. I arrived at 10:45 to find Victoria already inside, champagne flute in hand, surrounded by display cases of tiaras and jewelry. "You're early," I remarked, surprised. Victoria was chronically late to everything. "Couldn't sleep," she replied, her eyes bright with excitement. "Wait until you see what they've pulled for me." A saleswoman with an impeccable French twist approached with another champagne flute. "You must be Charlotte. Victoria has told us so much about you." She smiled professionally. "I'm Margot, and I'll be assisting today." Over the next hour, Victoria tried on tiaras that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She modeled necklaces and earrings, rejecting some for being too subtle and others for competing with the dress. Finally, Margot brought out what she called the piece de resistance, a diamond and pearl tiara with matching earrings and necklace. "This suite was inspired by royal jewels," Margot explained. "The center stones are heirloom-quality diamonds, surrounded by South Sea pearls. Truly one of a kind." Victoria's eyes widened. She tried on the pieces with reverent care, turning to examine her reflection from every angle. "It's exactly what I envisioned," she whispered. "Classic, but statement-making." I examined the price tag discreetly, $32,400 for the complete set. My stomach clenched. This single purchase would push me beyond the budget I'd established, leaving nothing for emergencies. I took a deep breath. "Vic, it's stunning, but maybe we should look at some other options? Something equally beautiful, but perhaps more aligned with the overall budget." Victoria's expression hardened. "What budget? You said to choose what I loved." "I know, but I was thinking we might need to balance some splurges with some savings." The dress was already quite an investment. "Investment?" Victoria's voice rose slightly. "Is that how you see my wedding? As a financial transaction?" Margot discreetly stepped away, leaving us in a tense bubble of privacy surrounded by sparkling jewelry. "Of course not," I said, keeping my voice low. "I just think we need to be realistic about the total costs. We've already committed to quite a lot in deposits." "You're being ridiculous," Victoria snapped, removing the tiara and placing it back in its velvet box. "You've always been like this. Counting pennies while the rest of us try to live meaningful lives." The unfairness of her statement hit me like a physical blow. Meaningful lives? I've been working 60-hour weeks to build my business while you've been floating from hobby to hobby, apartment to apartment, relationship to relationship. Who do you think has been covering your meaningful life all these years? Victoria's face flushed. "Oh, here we go. Saint Charlotte, always so responsible, so perfect. Do you know how exhausting it is being your sister? Nothing I do will ever measure up to your impossible standards." "My standards?" I was genuinely bewildered. "Victoria, I've supported every decision you've made. I've helped you financially countless times without judgment. Exactly, she exclaimed as if I'd proven her point. Without judgment. You say it, but your disapproval is always there, just beneath the surface. Your help comes with invisible strings, making me feel small, making me feel indebted. I shook my head, struggling to understand how my support had been so completely misinterpreted. That was never my intention. Intent doesn't matter, Victoria said, gathering her purse. The result is what counts. And the result is that you get to feel superior while I'm cast as the irresponsible younger sister who needs constant rescuing. That's not fair, I protested, feeling my control slipping. I've only ever wanted to help because I love you. If you loved me, Victoria said coldly, you wouldn't question the things that matter to me. This tiara and these jewels matter. They make me feel beautiful and special. Isn't that what a bride deserves on her wedding day? Of course, but what? But it costs too much? But you don't approve? But it's not what practical Charlotte would choose. Her voice grew louder with each question. Not everyone wants to live like you, Charlie. Some of us actually want beauty and joy in our lives, not just spreadsheets and savings accounts. Something inside me snapped. Years of suppressed frustration bubbled to the surface. The spreadsheets and savings accounts funded your beauty and joy. Who paid the deposit on your condo when you couldn't qualify for a mortgage? Who covered your credit card debt when you maxed out shopping? Who's been writing checks for this entire wedding? Margot had reappeared, hovering anxiously at the edge of our conversation. Other customers were glancing in our direction. Victoria noticed the attention and lowered her voice, but her eyes were cold. I never asked you to do any of that, she hissed. You offered. If it was such a burden, you should have said no. Would you have heard me if I did? Or would you have run to Mom and Dad, telling them how unsupportive I was being? Victoria's expression confirmed my suspicion. She would have done exactly that. You're just jealous, she said finally. You've always been jealous that I'm getting married before you, that I found someone while you're still alone. The accusation was so unexpected, so wildly off base, that I actually laughed. Jealous? Victoria, I ended my relationship with Michael because I couldn't start a family while supporting you. You've never even asked about my personal life, so you wouldn't know that. That's your choice, she snapped. Don't blame me for your decisions. I took a steadying breath. You're right. They were my choices. And now I'm making another one. I looked directly at Margot. I'm sorry, but we won't be purchasing any accessories today. Victoria's face flushed with anger. You're embarrassing me. No, you're embarrassing yourself, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. We're leaving. I'm not going anywhere, Victoria insisted, crossing her arms. These are perfect with my dress, and I'm getting them. With what money, Victoria? Your credit cards are maxed out. Mom and Dad can't afford this. Ethan's parents haven't contributed a dime yet. Then you'll just have to cover it, she said with casual entitlement that stunned me. Like you always do. And that's when it happened. As I stood there speechless at her audacity, Victoria turned to Margot and said, We'll take the set. My sister will be paying. Without thinking, I reached for Victoria's arm. We need to talk about this. Now. What happened next would replay in my mind for months to come. Victoria spun around, her face contorted with rage, and slapped me hard across the cheek. The sound echoed through the quiet boutique. Margot gasped. Other customers froze mid-conversation. Don't you dare tell me no, Victoria spat. Not about this. Not about my wedding. I stood there, my cheek burning, staring at my sister as if seeing her for the first time. In that moment of perfect clarity, I understood that nothing would ever change unless I changed it. Years of enabling had created this entitlement, this assumption that my resources were hers by right. Without a word, I turned and walked out of Elysium Bridal, leaving Victoria calling after me, her voice shifting rapidly from anger to panic as she realized what had just happened. I didn't look back. In the sanctuary of my car, I made a decision that would alter our family dynamic forever. I was done being Victoria's safety net. From this moment forward, she would face the consequences of her choices without my financial rescue. What I didn't realize then was just how far-reaching those consequences would be, or how quickly they would arrive. The aftermath of the slap was immediate and chaotic. My phone exploded with notifications before I even reached home. 17 missed calls from Victoria, voice messages growing increasingly frantic, and finally, text messages oscillating between rage and panic. How dare you walk out on me like that? You're being completely unreasonable. Please come back, we can talk about this. I need you to fix this now. I silenced my phone and poured myself a generous glass of wine. My cheeks still stung, both from the physical impact and the emotional blow. For the first time in my adult life, I allowed myself to fully acknowledge how much I'd sacrificed for Victoria's happiness and how little she valued those sacrifices. As evening fell, my parents called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened as my mother's voice, tight with controlled anger, filled my living room. Charlotte, I don't know what happened between you and your sister, but she is devastated. This is her wedding we're talking about. Whatever disagreement you had, you need to set it aside. Family comes first. Family comes first. The irony wasn't lost on me. Where was this sentiment when Victoria was belittling my career, my choices, my very existence? I poured another glass of wine and did something I'd never done before. I blocked Victoria's number and my parents' numbers. Just for the night, I told myself. Just to get some peace. That night, I pulled out all my financial records related to Victoria, loans never repaid, bills covered, emergencies handled. The total was staggering, $147,832 over 7 years. More than enough for a down payment on a house in Chicago's better neighborhoods. More than enough to have started the family Michael and I had discussed. I'd been subsidizing Victoria's lifestyle at the cost of my own future. Monday morning, I walked into my office with a clear head and a plan. I called my bank and canceled the checks I'd written for Victoria's wedding deposits. Next, I composed emails to each vendor explaining that I was no longer financially responsible for Victoria Reynolds' wedding arrangements. Finally, I drafted a detailed accounting of every dollar I'd given Victoria over the years and attached it to an email addressed to my sister, my parents, and, after a moment's hesitation, Ethan. I've been happy to support Victoria's dreams over the years, I wrote, but recent events have made me realize that my financial assistance has been taken for granted. Moving forward, I will no longer be funding the wedding or any other expenses. Attached is a record of previous financial support, which I am now formally categorizing as loans. I'm open to discussing a reasonable repayment plan. I hovered over the send button, questioning myself. Was this too harsh? Was I overreacting to one bad day? Then I remembered the sting of Victoria's palm against my cheek, the entitled dismissal in her voice as she declared I would pay for her extravagances. I hit send. The response was nuclear. Victoria called my office repeatedly until my assistant stopped putting her through. My father left voicemails demanding I fix this mess immediately. My mother showed up at my office, only to be politely but firmly turned away when I refused to see her. Through my office gossip network, I heard she'd made quite a scene in the lobby. 3 days of silence followed. I immersed myself in work, taking a peculiar comfort in spreadsheets and client meetings where expectations were clear and contributions valued. On Thursday evening, my doorbell rang. I peered through the peephole to see Ethan alone, shifting awkwardly in the hallway. Curiosity overcame caution, and I opened the door. Ethan. This is unexpected. He looked uncomfortable but determined. Can we talk? Just for a few minutes. I let him in, oddly calm. We sat in my living room, the city lights twinkling through the windows as dusk settled over Chicago. I didn't know, he said simply, about any of it. The money, the loans, the deposits. Victoria told me her parents were handling most of the wedding costs and that you were contributing a little bit as your gift. That's not surprising, I replied. Victoria has always been creative with financial truths. Ethan winced. I saw your spreadsheet. I had no idea you'd been supporting her for years. Would it have mattered if you had known? He considered this. Yes, it would have. I come from a family where financial responsibility is valued. My parents insisted I work through medical school despite our family resources to understand the value of earning. Finding out Victoria has been, he hesitated, living beyond her means. I supplied. Dependent, he corrected gently. It's concerning. We sat in silence for a moment. What happens now? I finally asked. Hey everyone, I know you're on the edge of your seats wondering what Ethan said next, and trust me, it's a bombshell. But first, if you're enjoying this family drama so far, please hit that like button to let me know. Are you Team Charlotte or Team Victoria at this point? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. And if you want to see more real-life stories like this one, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. Now, let's get back to what Ethan revealed that evening in my apartment. Ethan looked directly at me, his expression serious. Victoria and I are reevaluating our engagement. My parents, they've expressed concerns after seeing that email about compatibility and shared values. I never meant to derail your relationship, I said, surprised by the pang of guilt I felt. Despite everything, Victoria was still my sister. You didn't, Ethan assured me. You just revealed issues we need to address before marriage, not after. He hesitated. There's something else you should know. The reason I came alone tonight. Victoria and your parents are at your parents' house right now, working on a plan. What kind of plan? A way to proceed with the wedding without your financial input. Your parents are considering a second mortgage on their house. I felt sick. Our parents were in their 60s, finally enjoying retirement after decades of hard work. A second mortgage would devastate their financial security. They can't afford that. I tried to tell them that. I suggested we scale back, maybe delay the wedding until we can save properly. Victoria didn't take it well. I could imagine the scene. Victoria's tears, my mother's immediate capitulation, my father's gruff agreement to figure something out. The same dynamic that had played out countless times throughout our lives. What are you going to do? I asked. Ethan stood, straightening his jacket. I'm going to have a very difficult conversation with my fiancé. After that, he shrugged. We'll see. After Ethan left, I sat in my darkened living room for a long time, thinking about family patterns, enabling behaviors, and the true meaning of support. I'd been so caught up in being Victoria's safety net that I'd never considered whether my help was actually hurting her in the long run. Perhaps by withdrawing financial support, I was finally giving her the opportunity to grow. The next morning, I called my parents' financial advisor, an old family friend who had managed their retirement planning for years. After confirming I was on their approved contacts list, I asked him directly, are my parents considering a second mortgage? His hesitation told me everything. Charlotte, you know I can't discuss specific financial plans without their permission. Martin, please. I'm concerned about their long-term security. They're retired. A second mortgage at this stage would be devastating. Another pause. Let's just say I share your concerns and have expressed them. Forcefully. But ultimately, it's their decision. I thanked him and hung up, already formulating my next move. This had gone beyond Victoria's wedding or our personal disagreement. Now our parents' future was at stake. It was time for a family intervention, but I would need allies. I called Ethan. I need your help, I said without preamble. And possibly your parents' help too. Ethan listened as I outlined my plan. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Then, I'll talk to my parents. But Charlotte, this could end my engagement. I know, I acknowledged. And I'm sorry for that. But if Victoria would put our parents' retirement at risk for a one-day celebration, maybe that's something you need to know before you marry her. The intervention was set for Sunday dinner at my parents' home. Victoria had no idea I would be there or that Ethan's parents had also been invited. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either heal our family's dysfunctional patterns or fracture us beyond repair. Sunday arrived cold and rainy, matching my apprehensive mood as I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs. The familiar two-story colonial with its meticulously maintained garden had been the backdrop for countless family gatherings, holidays, and celebrations. Today, it would host a very different kind of family meeting. I'd arrived early deliberately, parking down the street to avoid alerting Victoria to my presence before everyone was assembled. At exactly 5:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the scheduled dinner, I watched Ethan's car pull into the driveway, his parents following in their Mercedes. Right on time. I gave them 5 minutes to get inside before making my entrance. The shock on Victoria's face when I walked through the front door was almost worth the anxiety of the past week. She sat frozen on the living room sofa, her mouth slightly open, as my mother rushed toward me. "Charlotte, what are you doing here? This isn't a good time." "Actually, Mom, this is exactly the right time," I said firmly, removing my coat and hanging it in the hall closet as if this were any ordinary family dinner. "I invited myself. And I believe Ethan and his parents are expecting me." My father emerged from the kitchen, a tumbler of scotch in his hand. "You've got some nerve showing up after the stunt you pulled, young lady." "Dad," I acknowledged with a nod. "I think we all need to talk. About the wedding. About money. About patterns that aren't serving any of us well." Victoria finally found her voice. "You have no right to be here. You've already ruined everything." "Your sister has every right to be here," came a firm voice from the dining room entrance. Diane Caldwell, Ethan's mother, stood with perfect posture, her expression serious, but not unkind. "In fact, we insisted on it." Victoria's head whipped toward Ethan. "You knew about this?" Ethan moved to stand beside his mother. "I did. Charlotte reached out to me, and after discussing it with my parents, we all agreed a family meeting was necessary." Richard Caldwell joined his wife and son. "Before we commit to joining our families, we need clarity about some concerning issues that have come to light." My mother looked bewildered. "What issues?" "I don't understand." "Financial issues, primarily," Richard said diplomatically. "And perhaps some questions about transparency and priorities." Victoria leapt to her feet. "This is ridiculous." Charlotte sends one melodramatic email full of exaggerations, and suddenly everyone's acting like I've committed some crime. I remained calm. "Nothing in that email was exaggerated, Vic. Every dollar was documented. Every loan recorded. I've been supplementing your lifestyle for years, and no one, not Ethan, not his family, not even our parents, knew the full extent of it." "Is this true?" my father asked, his expression troubled. "Victoria, have you been taking money from your sister all this time?" Victoria's face flushed. "She offered. I never forced her to help me." "And the wedding?" my mother interjected. "Charlotte, you promised to help with the deposits. You can't just pull out now. We've already started making other arrangements." "You mean a second mortgage?" I said quietly. "On your retirement home." My father's expression darkened. "That's none of your business." "It absolutely is my business when you're risking your financial security for a wedding that's spiraled completely out of control." Diane Caldwell cleared her throat. "If I may, when we agreed to this dinner, we were under the impression that the wedding plans were proceeding reasonably, within a budget our families had discussed." She glanced at Victoria, then back to my parents. "We've since learned that the current plans far exceed anything we had imagined. The venue alone is twice what we anticipated." My father looked uncomfortable. "Well, yes, but Victoria has her heart set on the peninsula, and we want her day to be perfect." "At what cost?" I asked gently. "Your retirement security? Your future." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "What are we supposed to do? The deposits have been paid. Invitations are about to go out. We can't just cancel everything." "Actually," I said, pulling out my tablet and opening a document I'd prepared, "you can. I've contacted each vendor. Most have cancellation policies that would allow for partial refunds if we act quickly. A few are willing to transfer deposits to a rescheduled date." Victoria's face had gone from flushed to pale. "You went behind my back to cancel my wedding." "No," I corrected. "I explored options." "There's a difference." Ethan had been quiet, but now he stepped forward. "Victoria, my parents, and I have been talking. We still want to move forward with the wedding, but on a much more reasonable scale. Something we can afford without putting your parents in financial jeopardy." "What does that mean?" Victoria demanded, her voice rising. "A backyard barbecue? City Hall? I won't be humiliated like that." "It means a beautiful but sensible celebration," Diane said firmly. "One that honors the occasion without starting your marriage in debt." Richard nodded. "We're prepared to contribute $30,000, which is what we've given each of our children for their weddings. With a similar amount from your parents, without a second mortgage, you could still have a lovely celebration." Victoria looked incredulous. $60,000? My dress alone cost almost half that. The room fell silent. My mother looked stunned. Your dress cost $30,000. It's a custom design, Victoria said defensively. Charlotte approved it. All eyes turned to me. I agreed to the deposit, I clarified. I didn't know you'd upgraded to custom design elements afterward. Victoria avoided everyone's gaze, confirming my suspicion that she'd added expensive modifications without telling me. My father set down his glass with a sharp click. This stops now. Victoria, you've been irresponsible and dishonest. Charlotte, you've been enabling her for years. And your mother and I have been blind to all of it. James, my mother began, but he cut her off with a gesture. No, Margaret. He's right. Richard Caldwell looked at Victoria with disappointment clear in his expression. Our family values honesty and financial responsibility. These revelations are deeply concerning to us. Ethan finally spoke directly to Victoria. I love you, but I can't start our marriage like this. We need to postpone the wedding until we can approach it responsibly together. Victoria's face crumpled. You're calling off the wedding? Because of her. She pointed at me accusingly. She's always been jealous of me. She's trying to ruin my life. This isn't about jealousy, I said wearily. It's about consequences. For years, you've spent money you didn't have, knowing I would cover it. You've made choices knowing someone else would handle the fallout. That's not sustainable, Vic. Not for you, not for me, not for our parents. So what now? Victoria demanded, tears streaming down her face. You've all ganged up on me, destroyed my wedding plans, humiliated me in front of Ethan's family. What exactly do you want from me? The room fell silent. It was Ethan who finally spoke, his voice gentle but firm. We want you to grow up, Victoria. To be a partner, not a dependent. To build a life together based on honesty and shared responsibility. My sister stared at him, mascara streaking down her cheeks. For the first time since I could remember, she seemed genuinely at a loss. I think, my father said heavily, that we all need to take some time to think. This dinner is over. As everyone prepared to leave, Diane Caldwell touched my arm. Thank you, she said quietly, for having the courage to speak up before it was too late. I nodded, unable to find words through the emotional exhaustion. As I gathered my things to leave, Victoria blocked my path to the door. I hate you, she whispered, voice trembling. You've ruined everything. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and felt a strange mix of sadness and resolution. No, Vic. You did that yourself. But it's not too late to fix it. I left her standing in our parents' foyer, the future of her relationship and our family hanging in the balance. The rain had stopped as I walked to my car, and a strange sense of peace settled over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't responsible for solving Victoria's problems. Whatever happened next would be up to her. 2 weeks passed without a word from Victoria or my parents. I immersed myself in work, taking on new clients and extending my office hours to fill the void. If colleagues noticed the dark circles under my eyes or my excessive caffeine consumption, they were kind enough not to mention it. On a particularly dreary Wednesday, my assistant buzzed my office. There's a Margaret Reynolds here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment. My mother. I considered refusing to see her, then sighed. Send her in. She entered hesitantly, looking smaller somehow than I remembered. Her designer handbag and perfectly coordinated outfit couldn't hide the weariness in her eyes. Charlotte, she said simply. Mom. Please sit down. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She settled into it, smoothing her skirt with nervous hands. This is a lovely office. I don't think I've been here since your grand opening. 3 years ago, I confirmed. The silence stretched between us. Your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking, she finally said. And talking. More honest talking than we've done in years. I waited, unwilling to make this easier for her. We canceled the second mortgage application, she continued. And we've been looking at our finances more carefully. Your father even suggested meeting with a financial advisor to review our retirement plan. That's good, I said cautiously. It is. But that's not why I'm here. She took a deep breath. I owe you an apology, Charlotte. A significant one. I blinked in surprise. My mother had never been one for apologies. For years, We put all the responsibility on your shoulders while giving all the attention to Victoria. We praised her beauty and charm while taking your strength and reliability for granted. We never asked what it cost you, financially or emotionally. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. The simple endearment, so rarely used, broke something loose inside me. Tears I'd been suppressing for weeks spilled over. I just wanted to be seen, Mom. To be valued for who I am, not just what I could provide. She reached across the desk to take my hand. I see you now. I wish I had sooner. We talked for nearly an hour. Really talked, in ways we never had before. About Victoria's patterns, about my enabling, about their parenting choices. About the future. Victoria's moved back home, she revealed. Ethan returned the ring, at least for now. He said they needed space to reevaluate. I winced, genuinely sorry despite everything. That must be hard for her. It is. But maybe necessary. My mother hesitated. She's looking for a job. A real one, with regular hours and accountability. Really? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. Really? Your father insisted. No more allowance, no more bailouts. If she wants to stay with us, she needs to contribute. As my mother prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Will you come for dinner this Sunday? Your father and I would like that. Victoria, well, she'll need to adjust. I considered declining, then reconsidered. Yes, I'd like that. The first Sunday dinner was awkward, to put it mildly. Victoria barely spoke to me, answering in monosyllables when directly addressed. My father grilled steaks and made stiff attempts at conversation. My mother fluttered nervously between us all. But we got through it. And the next one. And the one after that. 3 months later, Victoria had secured an entry-level position at a public relations firm. The salary was modest, but it was a start. She'd moved into an apartment with a roommate, a far cry from her luxury condo, which she'd been forced to sell. On a rainy Saturday, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Victoria, without makeup, dressed in jeans and a sweater. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside, curious and cautious. She wandered my apartment, touching things absently, clearly gathering her courage. I've been seeing a therapist, she finally said. Dad's paying. One of his conditions. That's good, I offered neutrally. Yeah, it is. She turned to face me. She's helping me understand some things. About patterns. About consequences. She swallowed hard, about how I've treated you. I sat down, motioning for her to do the same. I'm not ready to apologize for everything, she admitted. I'm still angry about how things turned out with Ethan. But I am sorry I slapped you. That was inexcusable. Thank you, I said softly. That means something to me. Victoria nodded, blinking back tears. My therapist thinks I've been compensating for insecurity with material things and status symbols. That I've been competing with you my whole life because I felt inferior. Inferior? To me? I was genuinely shocked. But you were always the golden child. The beautiful one. The charming one. And you were the smart one. The successful one. The one who didn't need anyone's help or approval. She gave a watery smile. Do you have any idea how intimidating that is? We talked for hours that day, beginning the slow, painful process of rebuilding our relationship. Not as enabler and enabled, but as sisters with separate strengths and separate paths. Over the next 6 months, Victoria continued therapy and excelled at her job. She reconnected with Ethan, cautiously at first, meeting for coffee to talk about what had gone wrong and what they both wanted for the future. By Christmas, they were dating again on a much more equal footing. My relationship with my parents evolved too. They began to show interest in my work, my friends, my life. My father called for investment advice. My mother invited me shopping and actually considered my opinions on her selections. Most significantly, I started dating again. I met Daniel, an architectural engineer, at a charity event. He was steady and kind, with a quiet confidence that put me at ease. For our third date, he cooked dinner at his apartment instead of suggesting an expensive restaurant. I knew then that he was different, that we were starting on the right foundation. When Victoria and Ethan got engaged again the following spring, everything was different. They announced it at a small family dinner with a simple solitaire ring that Ethan had saved for, not financed. "We're planning a small ceremony," Victoria told me afterward. 50 guests maximum. At the Botanical Gardens. No designer dress, no extravagant honeymoon. "Are you okay with that?" I asked, searching her face for signs of resentment. She surprised me with a genuine smile. "More than okay. We want to start our marriage focused on what really matters. Not debt and stress and impossible expectations." She hesitated. "And I was hoping, would you be my maid of honor?" For real this time. Tears pricked my eyes. "I'd be honored." 1 year after the boutique incident, I stood beside Victoria as she married Ethan in a sunlit ceremony at the Chicago Botanical Gardens. Her dress was elegant but simple, purchased off the rack and altered by a local seamstress. The flowers were seasonal, the cake homemade by a talented friend, the photographs taken by Ethan's cousin who was building her portfolio. The total budget? Under $15,000, a fraction of what the original wedding would have cost. Victoria and Ethan had saved for it together, splitting expenses equally. My gift to them was a honeymoon fund, which they accepted graciously but insisted on matching with their own savings. As Victoria and Ethan exchanged vows, I glanced at my parents sitting in the front row. My father, dignified in his best suit, held my mother's hand tightly. They looked happy, relieved, proud. I thought about how far we'd all come in 12 months, the difficult conversations, the painful reckonings, the slow rebuilding of trust. At the reception, Diane Caldwell embraced me warmly. "You know, when you sent that email a year ago, I thought our families would never speak again. Now look at us." "Sometimes things have to break before they can heal properly," I replied. She nodded knowingly. "Victoria has grown so much. We're proud to welcome her into our family now." Later, as the small crowd danced and celebrated, Victoria found me sitting alone, watching the festivities. "Happy?" I asked. "Happier than I would have been with the big production I originally planned," she admitted, smoothing her simple silk dress. "This feels real." "It is real," I assured her. She took my hand, an uncharacteristically vulnerable gesture. "I've been thinking about what you did that day at the boutique." Walking away. "I'm not proud of how it happened," I said. "No, but it was necessary. You stopped enabling me. You forced me to face reality." She squeezed my hand. It was the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me, even though it didn't feel that way at the time. The music changed to a slow song, and Daniel appeared, offering his hand. "May I steal your sister for a dance?" Victoria smiled. "She's all yours." As Daniel led me onto the dance floor, holding me close with the easy familiarity we'd developed over the past year, I caught sight of Victoria rejoining Ethan, their heads bent together in intimate conversation. "Everything okay?" Daniel murmured against my hair. "Better than okay," I replied, resting my head on his shoulder. "Everything is exactly as it should be." Later that night, after the last guests had departed and the newlyweds had left for their modest honeymoon in Michigan wine country, I stood in the garden alone, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The slap that had stung my cheek that day in the bridal boutique had ultimately been a gift, the shock that broke a destructive pattern and forced us all to grow. My sister had transformed from an entitled princess to a partner and equal. My parents had recognized their role in creating our dysfunctional dynamic. And I had learned to set boundaries, to value myself enough to say no when necessary. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop saving them from themselves. As I gazed up at the stars, I felt a profound sense of peace. The wedding we'd celebrated today wasn't the lavish affair Victoria had originally envisioned, but it was infinitely more meaningful. Built on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine love, not designer labels and status symbols. I thought about my own future with Daniel, about the ring he'd hinted was coming soon, about the life we were planning together. It would be a life built on solid ground, on shared goals and open communication. I smiled, taking one last look at the garden where my sister had begun her new life before turning toward the exit. It was time to go home and continue building mine. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me on this journey of family drama, personal growth, and eventual redemption. If this story resonated with you in any way, I'd love to hear about similar experiences you've had with family dynamics or difficult boundaries in your own life. Has karma ever come back around in your relationships? Did standing your ground actually improve things in the long run? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories, and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Your support means everything to me, and I'm grateful for each and every one of you who took the time to listen. Remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Until next time.